Let's just talk about this. Let's talk about Warren Buffett buying Barrick Gold, which I know you did an entire podcast on. And I want you to first address, how do you address the criticism that, hey, look, Peter, he's buying a gold company. He's not buying physical gold, number one. Number two, it probably wasn't even Buffett. It was probably one of his minions. And number three, it's only a $560 million position. Maybe he just peppered it into the portfolio for a little diversification, and he hasn't really turned tail and become a gold bug.
Yeah, well, I think the natural tendency from Main Street or mainstream rather might be to try to dismiss this, right? That's, your first thing. Hey, why is Buffett doing this? And, even though Buffett has talked in the past about, why he owned gold, it just sits there. He has always said that he prefers businesses as an inflation hedge, that he thinks that buying a business where you have real tangible assets, where you have pricing power, that is a better way to hedge against inflation. But Warren Buffett seems to have a very good understanding of inflation. He doesn't regard it as rising prices. He regards it as money supply. He's talked about inflation as a tax on savers, as a hidden tax, as a cruel tax. He understands the loss of value of money, and he basically says that that's inflation, the erosion of the purchasing power of money. And he can see the monetary policy that exists and that is going to exist. And I think Warren Buffett now has a much darker outlook on inflation than he did in the past. And I think that he recognizes that while owning businesses may be a good hedge against moderate inflation or, kind of a more benign inflation, 2% a year or something like that, I think Warren Buffett is now of the opinion that inflation is going to be so much higher than that, that he thinks that this is now a period of time that we're entering where gold is going to be particularly important to own rather than just owning businesses. But I think when you buy Barrick Gold, you really get the best of both worlds as far as Buffett is concerned, because Barrick Gold is a business, and it's in the business of mining and selling gold. And so there, Buffett is not simply buying the metal and letting it sit there. He is buying a business that he sees tremendous value in. But he wouldn't see tremendous value in the business if he didn't see potential in the price of gold. In fact, if he thought the price of gold was going to go down, he wouldn't want anything to do with Barrick.
Right.
I think it's because he has a positive outlook on people using gold as an inflation hedge. He sees that demand for gold, like demand for any product that a business might produce, he sees demand going up, and he looks at the balance sheet of this business and he sees a great business. He sees earnings, he sees dividends, and he sees a bright future. So I think you actually have to be more bullish on gold when you're buying a gold company than if you're just buying the metal, because clearly if the price of gold goes down, there's a lot more downside risk in the miners than there is just in the metal itself. And I think there's a lot more upside potential in the mining stock. So it's kind of like a levered bet on gold. So if you're really bullish on gold, you may focus on the miners. But I remember reading, and I mentioned this on my podcast, an article that Warren Buffett wrote many years ago. You can still see it up on the internet, about Squanderville and Squander Bucks. And Squanderville was the United States, and Squander Bucks was the U.S. dollar. And Buffett was very worried about the value of the dollar, and because of the deficits that we were running at the time and the money we were printing, which is small by comparison to what's going on today. And so Buffett has expressed many of the same concerns that I've expressed during his career about profligate deficit spending and artificially low interest rates and money printing. It's just kind of he's put on this public persona to really try to be the guy that's optimistic, that's bullish on America, and he's kind of downplayed the need, to hedge against inflation or the deficits. But I think at this point, maybe Buffett is surprised, and I don't know why, but by the degree, to which, we've now gone, off the deep end when it comes to these things. We've pushed the envelope to the point where Buffett now has to acknowledge that it's a problem. And so he's buying. And so the other criticisms or the way people are dismissing this, well, it probably wasn't Warren Buffett. It was probably one of his portfolio managers. Well, I don't know. I mean, I kind of doubt, given the public statements that Buffett has made about gold, being, why buy gold, and given how, sharply this investment really contrasts with everything else they've done. I mean, obviously anybody knew that, hey, if Berkshire Hathaway buys a gold stock, that in and of itself is going to be a big news because it makes a big statement. I really don't think that somebody would make an investment like that without running it by Buffett. I mean, I don't think Buffett would end up being blindsided, like, oh, whoa, I didn't know you guys did that. Whoa,
Right.
I'm pretty sure that since it was kind of not a typical, Buffett stock, that before they did something that was a little bit out of the ordinary, they would probably give Buffett a call and say, hey, Warren, we're thinking about buying a gold stock. What do you think? Or just get some kind of input rather than risking, doing something that might, get the guy to be pissed. Like, what the hell are you guys doing?
That would be like one of your employees getting you long the dollar without telling you.
Yeah, it just seems like, I mean, if they were doing something, that really was typical Buffett, it was probably okay. But I just have a hard time believing that he didn't know about it. And even if he didn't make the decision, if he knew about it and he didn't tell them not to do it, then obviously he agrees with it, right? I mean, because if it was something he didn't want to do, he would have said, no, let's not do that. Even just sending, I don't want to send that kind of signal. I don't want to, it's like he's all his money has been, I'm with the table, I'm betting the numbers, and it's like, well, let's put something on the don't pass line. Oh no, I don't want to do that. It's like, it's like anti the crowd, right? I don't want to be betting, betting on that.
Yeah. The video that you posted, I talked about on my own podcast. First off, I said Buffett always says, don't bet against America. And what he should have been saying was, don't bet against the Fed. That should have been his actual, but it's a nice PR polish to come out and make it seem as though you're doing something patriotic by riding the Fed's wave. I saw the video that you posted. Go ahead. Did you want to respond to that?
Yeah, well, I was just saying that, buying gold and gold stocks is betting on the Fed. I mean, you're betting that the Fed will keep doing what it's doing. And so, if you don't buy gold stocks, then you're betting the Fed is going to change. So you're betting the Fed is going to come to its senses, recognize the mistake that it's made, and correct them. That the Fed is going to finally do the right thing, right? So I'm not making that bet. I'm betting that the Fed will continue doubling down on failed policies and never admit that it got anything wrong. I don't think the Fed will ever change until everything it's done has completely blown up in its face to the point that there's a currency crisis. And then maybe they'll get religion. It's kind of like a guy, that maybe you finally get cancer or something and you're about to die, and all of a sudden you go to church because you're confronted with, maybe you've been an atheist your whole life, but all of a sudden you're about to die and you're like, now you find religion or something. I don't know. But I think that may happen to the Fed because as long as they could keep printing money and the negative consequences are not as apparent in that they're not showing up, at the supermarket, in a big way. As long as the inflation is concentrated in asset prices and they can keep on moving the stock market higher or the real estate market higher or the bond market higher, and foreigners are willing to stockpile our IOUs and keep supplying American consumers with all sorts of stuff that they didn't produce and can't really afford, well, then there's no reason for the Fed to stop. I mean, why end a party prematurely when you don't have to, right? But eventually, when the cops raid the place, that's when the party's going to come to an end. And I don't think we're that far away from that point, right? I think that is, what people are missing is that, this is not a problem for our grandparents. I mean, for our grandkids, right? I keep hearing people saying, look, we're leaving this mess for our kids. We're leaving all this debt for our children. Look, I don't think our children are going to deal with this debt. I think it's going to be wiped out before they get a chance to inherit it. So we're going to deal with the consequences in terms of inflation. And I think Buffett can see that. And, when people say, but this is only a small investment, right? It's only, $500-600 million, which, for Buffett is small. I mean, it's not small for a normal person or even, even a normal hedge fund. If they were to put $500 million into a gold stock, that would be a big position for a hedge fund, but for Berkshire Hathaway, it's not a lot. But my counter to that is that, first of all, every journey begins with the first step. And so simply looking at this Barrick position, how do you know that Buffett is finished buying?
Right.
How do you know that he isn't just starting to build a position and that he's going to build a much bigger position over time? This is just his initial foray into the sector. Who knows what's behind it, right? Then my other point would be that, well, this disclosure that we're getting is from the end of the third quarter. So how do you know how much more he bought, right, since then?
Yeah, you don't.
And
there's
and
like 54 days in there now where he could have been buying and would not have had to disclose it yet.